Well, hello and welcome everyone. I am Lorian Varela and I serve as the director of the Learning Resources Center. And I am happy to present Transfer Success, academic resources and the secret title, aka the secrets to studying. I am really excited to be here because I myself was a transfer student. And so I know that experience of starting off at one institution and then completing at another. And so, first of all, I just want to say big kudos to everyone and just so glad that you're here with us and you're part of the Links family. And so, today in our time that we have, I want to give you an overview of the big topic areas that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the Learning Resources Center services, and we call ourselves the LRC. That's our acronym. Then I want to talk just briefly a little bit about how we learn so that you can see then when we move into effective learning strategies and study techniques, you can see why we're recommending these strategies. And so if you visit our LRC website, and it's super easy because it's www.ucdenver.edu/LRC. And when you go to our website, we have a virtual desk that if between 8 and 5 p.m. on Monday through Friday, you want to talk to one of our office staff members live and ask about services or have a question or you're experiencing any challenges, you can pop in and visit with them. You can also send us an email, and our email is lrc@ucdenver.edu. We're trying to keep it as simple and memorable as possible. And then our website has a series of tiles, and these take you deeper into each of these service areas. So if you're interested in our tutoring and you want to see how to sign up for our appointment-based tutoring that's in small groups, or if you want to see the drop-in tutoring schedule, both of them are available through that first tile. If you have one of our chemistry or physics courses or biology that we offer supplemental instruction or SI for, you can see the schedule of what we offer and the instructions on how to sign up. For our iPrep services, these always occur right at the beginning of a semester, so right before semester starts or the first couple weeks. And these are with chemistry, and we're always developing new partnerships with our iPrep services. But think of this as like the refresher to get you up to speed so you start that class right. And so we divide up in 2-hour workshop kind of increments, different things that help people get up to speed. So for chemistry, this was a refresher so that you started chemistry and you started strong. And then with our study skill workshops, these are live workshops that we have available online, and someday again it will be in person. And it's also our new workshop library. And so that you can look at any of our almost 50 videos and view whatever part of them that you want on different topic areas. And you're also able to make any coaching appointment to talk about a workshop, either that you couldn't attend or one you saw online. Or if you want to talk just specifically about your own time management, learning strategies, things like that, well, we encourage you to check out signing up for an appointment. We have English language learning services, and this is both conversational partners and then a little bit of U.S. culture appreciation. And then when we're back in person, we will have our resource library checkout, which has textbooks, OChem models, skeleton, a keyboard to practice on, whole sorts of things. And you're probably like, okay, how do I sign up for these great services? Well, we have a system called Navigate. And when you enter your CU Denver access, you'll be able to see sign up for an appointment. And we are listed under all those services as Learning Resource Center Virtual. And so look up for the virtual LRC, and you can sign up for our workshops, and you can see the group workshops or individual workshops to sit down and talk to someone about that topic area. Uh, this is where our tutoring, our supplemental instruction, iPrep, and English language learning will all be available here. And so just to share a little bit about learning, our brains are amazing. And something our brains are built to do is they're built to forget and bat away information. And so when our brain is not actively engaged, it starts to, after a couple minutes, figure out that that's not important for survival, and it bats away the information. And so, unfortunately, this happens when we're studying. So if you've ever read a page over and over and found that you get to the bottom of the page and you don't remember anything you just read, that's an example of your brain doing what it's supposed to biologically do, batting away the extraneous information. And so what we have to do is we have to keep it active, we have to keep it engaged, and we have to build up those pathways. And so I tell folks, when you are learning something new, I want you to imagine it's like one of our beautiful Colorado fields that hasn't been touched. There's grass and flowers everywhere. The first time we learn that piece of information, we're walking across that grass and maybe we're bending it a little bit, but the next day when we come back, that grass has popped mostly back up. It's almost as if someone didn't even walk over it. So we have to go over it again. And maybe this time we shuffle our feet and we're starting to scrape up the grass and create that pathway through that field. And then the next time we go through, we bring our hiking poles. And as we go through, we are stirring up the dirt and we're creating a better pathway. And then the next time we go through, we take a pocket full of rocks and we drop them down. And over time, we create a well-worn path that it's easy to see where it's at. It's easy to travel up and down. And just like the synapses in your brain, when you're learning a piece of information, you're creating that bridge and that pathway. And the more you use it and the different ways in which you use it, and the more active it is, the stronger that bridge becomes. And so when you sit down for an exam or you're writing a comprehensive paper, you're able to pull all that information up. And this pathway is exactly why when you get into your upper level classes, it feels like it's easier, the learning, but you're actually building upon all those previous classes. And so we really have to work to take things to the long term. And something important to know is no matter how advanced our society has gotten and our species has gotten, the one thing we haven't figured out how to do yet is how to increase our working memory space. So we're all born with a certain amount of working memory space, and we can't exceed it. And the point is, when things come into our sensory memory, that beginning memory, that working memory, we need to pay attention to it to move it out of that working memory and into short-term memory. And if we don't pay attention to it, then our brain releases it because it's not important, but it does occupy space until it's released. And because you have that capacity, until you start to chunk and put information together and move it to short-term memory, you reach capacity. So if, as a transfer student and a new student, if you have ever misplaced your wallet, your car keys, your coffee cup, forgotten appointments, confused the classes that you're taking, forgot about a quiz or a paper due, those are all examples of your working memory being at capacity and part of the transition experience. And so you pay attention to information and it goes into short-term memory. But unless you rehearse it, unless you use it, unless you manipulate it and explore it and play with it, it doesn't get encoded into long-term memory. And so you're going to want to practice with it. And that's exactly why professors have you do sample homeworks, and they provide quizzes. They're making you have to work with it so that it's easier to retrieve, because it becomes part of your permanent long-term memory. And a final reminder, just as we close up talking about how we learn, it's that people are really hard about failure. But failure is your first attempt in learning. And so the only time to lament making mistakes or failing something is if you don't spend time figuring out what happened and how to improve upon it. And so I tell folks, when you take a test and you get that test back, spend time looking at, what did you do well? What were the content areas in which you were on fire? What were the learning strategies and study strategies you did which were effective? How did you guess what was going to be on the exam? And how accurate were you? And then also spend time looking at the mistakes you made. Were they careless mistakes that if you spend more time and you slow down how you take the test, you'll do better? Were they because you were really nervous and a little bit of test anxiety? And so you might want to attend some of our workshops and reach out to staff to help you work through that, of how can you be mindful and get in a good place right before the exam. Did you have the feeling like you couldn't you recalled reading the information but you couldn't pull it up? Then we need to look at your retrieval strategies and maybe practicing more in different ways. But the important thing is, when you make those mistakes, they are an opportunity to hone and perfect and really get well at it. And I tell folks, just like when you were learning to ride a bicycle, you were not perfect at it. It took some trial and error. It took falling down and getting bumps and bruises and maybe even crashing into things. And then when you get really good at riding a bike, you can jump on it and go from A to B and not even think about all the specific steps you're using to get there. That's part of practice makes perfect. And so some things that will help is learning a little bit on how the strategies of how you can learn most effectively will help you in improvising the different study strategies you do. And so I like to talk with us about chunking information. Again, when you have all this new information you're learning all those specific steps, and those pieces of information are taking space in that working memory. And until you start to chunk them together, so that toothbrushing in this example encapsulates all these separate steps, but we no longer think about these steps. We think, I have to brush my teeth. That example of I have to brush my teeth, it only takes one piece of information in your brain versus all the steps it took at the beginning. And so a lot of times professors, they have been studying their subject for 10, 15, 20 years, and they may not remember all those specific steps because they're so far removed from it and they've chunked that information in their brain. Well, this is why creating study groups with your peers or attending SI or dropping in on tutoring, all of those things are important, because somebody who might be a little bit closer to the information can help recall those specific steps. And a lot of times when we're struggling with something to understand a concept, we're just learning those steps and maybe missing some and just need help reviewing that. Something else that helps us is, think of this like a superpower. When you hear or read something and you take notes, you're activating one way of learning. But then if you draw diagrams with what you're learning, it's magnified. And so what we want to do is make it as magnified and active as possible. So when you hear and read and you write and diagram, it's really stands out in your brain. And there are all different types of diagrams. And so try to come up with different ways to represent the information. So think about having your notes from lecture and maybe having it the page divided up, that you also put your notes from the chapters you're reading. And then also how you put the diagrams to it. So I've seen cartoon strips and timelines and infographics and fill in the blank diagrams and flow charts. All of these are ways to make that information come out in a different method. And as you're reviewing this information, see the connections it has between other things you're learning. So make connections between different ideas that are coming up in your subjects and even different ideas that are coming up in other classes. And so sometimes economics connects with math, connects with what we're reading in literature. Think about ideas and how they're similar and how they're different. And this will help it stand out in your brain more. And so explain it. Ask yourself questions while you're studying and just ponder. You learn a concept. How does that work in real life? Why does it work that way? And then find answers in your class materials, so your lectures and your notes, and then discuss them with your classmates. And again, you're starting to see that this is making it active, but really engaging with other humans helps you learn information better. Practice recall. So put away your class materials and then try to write down or sketch, or you could even act it out, everything that you remember from that section. And try to be as thorough as possible, and then go back and see, what did you remember and what did you miss? And then you can add in those points. And by practicing doing it, you're building that pathway in your brain. And the beautiful thing about everything that I've shared so far about learning strategies, this has been researched and proven to be ways of more effective learning by psychologists and educators. And so it is just awesome to implement this into your practice. And again, lots of testing. Take as many practice tests as you can get your hands on. If there aren't practice, you might want to do a Google search, because there's a lot of open educational information out there that can be like practice and modeling that you can use for your subjects. But you don't need anybody else. If you don't have somebody in class to exchange possible test questions with, you can do it on your own by developing flashcards and making lists of questions and then going back and quizzing yourself. I have even heard of people talking to their dogs, their cats, their fish, their pet snakes, and explaining concepts to them, and having to work through problems and talk it out loud. Whatever it takes. And your family members or friends are great people, even if they're not in your classes, great people to talk to and say, let me explain this concept and see if you understand it based on how I explained it. Something else to do, so these are all just great things, and you can pick and choose whatever might work for you in the subject you're studying, but think about switching it up. So this is the idea of switching between the concepts that you're learning during a study session. So you spend time on topic A, and then you shift gears almost like a car to topic B, and then to topic C. And you'll want to make sure that you don't go too quickly, but that you also don't spend too long, because then your mind is going to numb up and it's going to let it go. And again, with research that they've done, our brains have the ability to stay on task and focused anywhere between 30 minutes and 120 minutes. And that's the beginning and the end of where most humans fall with their focus time. And so for me personally, somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour is the longest I can go before I start to lose my focus. And what it means is, if I were to spend 3 hours studying that one subject in a row with no change up and no break, I would lose effectiveness. I would essentially be reading that page over and over and only retaining a portion of it. Whereas if I were a fresher and the time was broken into smaller chunks, I would be retaining what I'm reading more effectively. And with that switch it up, you're going to want to keep it fresh by switching between the topics. So like study session 1, you study topic A, topic B, topic C. And then you take a break, you do something different. Maybe it's the next day. You're back studying and you do topic C, topic B, topic A. And then again, next study session, topic A, topic C, topic B. And not only can you do this within topics of a subject, you could switch between subjects. I've seen people do, half an hour studying chemistry, and then they switch to music theory, and then they switch to psychology, and then to economics. You're keeping your mind fresh, but you're also making yourself struggle. And so by struggle, I mean it's developing those pathways in the brain. And so when they've done different research on this, they have had groups of people study, and some study it in a mass block, and then others study it using this like keeping it fresh and mixing it up method. Afterwards, the people who mixed it up remembered and recalled at a better rate than the folks who studied in a big mass group. And they asked them which method felt more effective. And the people all said mass studying, of sticking with one topic for a long period of time, it felt like it was more effective. However, the results showed that the mixing it up and the breaking things into smaller blocks are more effective. So just as you're going into it, understand that paradox of it feels like you're struggling more and it feels like it's taking longer to go back and recap, and know that that is actually where the learning's happening and where the remembering is happening. And so you're going to want to take that harder path because that's going to help you remember things for longer. And we're back to the chunks of time. So instead of studying 5 hours right before an exam, or even doing 10 hours of study on a weekend, saying I'm going to study all day Saturday, think about spreading it out. And this means looking at those little chunks throughout the week where you can rotate through different topics and subjects, but that spreading it out is actually more effective. And so again, in different research, people who have spread it out could actually study less hours because they were revisiting and having to recap and having to recall where they were at, versus doing it all in one group where that path, it doesn't stick as much. Those leaves of grass, the leaves of grass just pop back up, and you haven't built that pathway. So chunks of time spread out. And as you're thinking about spacing it out, when you're reviewing information, so let's say you're reviewing your notes from your most recent lecture, also push yourself and go back and refresh on the notes from last week and the week before. And this is really helpful to helping build that cumulative effect, and it will help you with final exams. And so if you're going to refresh with your notes, make sure you go back in time so that you're making that feel more recent and more memorable. So I gave a lot of different effective learning techniques and strategies, and now I want to dive into a little bit more specific. These are things you can incorporate in your studying that will help you learn more effectively. And I love this meme. The teacher says highlight only the important parts, because I do see students highlighting and underlining everything. And when that happens, it's not standing out in their brain. So thinking about, if you find yourself highlighting too much, what other strategies can you do that will help you remember that information? And so starting off with lectures, when you're hearing your professor lecture and your classmates ask questions, put these into your own words when you're taking notes, and be sure to use colors, different colors and highlighters to help things stand out. Be sure to draw those pictures, and even in the margins, you might want to set aside the margins so that you can put pictures, you can put diagrams, you can ask yourself questions, you can write down page numbers that you need to go back to in the chapter, and things like that. And when you're looking at what's going on in the lecture and trying to figure out what's important, things that are written on boards, numbers, people's formulas, when your instructor uses gestures or gets louder, when things are being repeated. And look for signposts, words that indicate a new topic or that a point is important, such as next, most importantly, furthermore. These are important summary topic tie-ins, and these signposts will help you make notes and kind of highlight in your notes what you need to remember. And note-taking styles. We have entire workshops that we offer in the LRC about different note-taking styles. So I'm just going to highlight two really briefly. One is outline. So instead of using bullets, use outline points. And folks are like, well, why is this such a good strategy? Number one, it helps you, instead of using a lot of extra words, you can get to the point really quickly, and you can use a lot less words to summarize concepts. But also, it makes you put it in relationships. And so in this example, you can see that the person has tied all the points that are under advantages of agriculture together, and then all the disadvantages. And then this creates a section where they're comparing and contrasting the advantages and disadvantages. It will be great for them in reviewing. They'll be able to recap and refresh on those two areas very quickly. And then the Cornell note-taking method. And here you can see you write a main idea in a left column and details in a right, and then you write a summary on the bottom. And you quiz yourself by covering the right column. You can do this in all sorts of different ways. I've seen people divide their notes into quadrants. I've seen them do two pieces of paper and fold it in half. I've seen them create boxes on a Word document and type in things. Whatever style works for you and what works best for the content of that class. Because one thing you will notice with note-taking, the note-taking strategy and style you use for economics may not work for music theory. And so what you want to figure out for each class is, what style of note-taking will best capture the information and help me remember this concept. And that goes with a lot of things. You will encounter some classes that you have more experience in, so you can study less than hours a week. And you will see other subjects that you're just learning, or maybe it's something you've never really thought about before. It will take you more hours of studying. So with your courses, each is going to be individual on the strategies and amount of time you have to spend in that area. Note-taking checklists. This is a great thing to do to help you prepare before class, what you're doing during class, and what you're doing after class. And you can see before class, spending time to refresh, making sure you have the supplies you need before you start your class. Have you read the assignments to it? And then during class, this is where in the online world, you're going to make sure that you have a space where you can sit for that class, and you could change it and do a different space for the next class to kind of keep it fresh with your brain. But can you be uninterrupted and be able to focus on what the professor is saying so your brain doesn't bat that away and tune it out? And so during class, you're going to want to take notes. You're going to want to make it active. You're going to want to think about what you learned in the reading. You're going to want to write down possible test questions that you think you would ask yourself if you were teaching the class. And then after class, you're going to want to go over the notes, and you're going to want to add in things or make notes of things that you need to research more and go back and add more detail to. And this is where, again, those potential test questions are really great. And make sure that you're saying it out loud, you're acting it out loud, you're diagramming it, you're doing all the things to make it stand out in your brain. Now, with recalling information, there's a lot of ways that you can practice testing and quizzing yourself. And so you can create flashcards on little note cards and do that. You can have a family member go through the note cards and ask you to explain it. And even the test can be, do they understand the concept after you've explained it? You can teach others in a study group. You can pop into some of our drop-in tutoring and hear the questions other people ask, or just form some questions on your own. You can create visual aids from memory and fill in the blank, especially like with not anatomy is really great to have a diagram and have to go in and fill in the parts but not have any of the information there. I've seen people take their notes and get note cards, and let's say you have notes from a chapter. Can on 3 note cards you summarize everything you remember from the chapter? And can you break it down into summary questions or summary answers so that you don't have to go back to your chapter notes? Now you have note cards. And people have retyped their notes. Concept maps, oh, these are so good to take a concept and have to fill in the boxes. And first you can develop the concept map, but then you can go back later and have an empty concept map and put in the different concepts. So arrows are a great way for understanding relationships between ideas. And this is called the TRIMS reading method. And what this does is it allows you to break down your reading into the most active way possible. Because a lot of times students are like, I'm reading the chapter and I'm spending so much time, but I don't feel like I'm remembering it. Because we can't just read it. And I tell folks, try using the TRIMS method. So the first one, the T is for title. So when you start a new chapter, write out the title and try to write, what is that chapter going to be about? And then look as you're reading the relationships. Relate this chapter topic to other unit topics in the table of contents. How does this material relate to the lecture or course syllabus? How does this relate to what your professor has been emphasizing in those lectures? With introduction, you're going to skim the intro of the chapter, and as you're reading, you're going to start to list key points. And then you're going to group similar points together, and you can even draw charts where you also contrast with not similar points. Renumber the points once you've grouped them together. Write a short paragraph. And the whole point of this is not just reading, but doing things with the information to group them together, to find similarities, to find differences, to find how they relate to other topics and subjects. By just implementing that, you will make the reading stand out more in your mind. With main headings, list the main headings and subheadings. That will help you in recapping concepts. You're also going to want to maybe have a sheet where you list key terms. You're going to want to make note of charts and graphs. And maybe you create a chart of how material interrelates to each other. So how does that one chart relate to the key terms, relate to the headings? So all of that you can do to make things stand out. And then summary. You're going to want to list key points, combine and condense points, switch things from a big sheet of paper to a small note card, number the key points and sequence ideas, put into paragraph form, and self-test. And so this is what we teach as the TRIMS reading method. You don't have to do each and every one of these. And that's the same with all these strategies. You can pick and choose the portions that you want to try. And I tell folks, try different things and see how it's working for you and evaluate how effective that strategy is for you. One thing that we'll provide is we have an LRC handout on the study cycle. And this is something that if students are like, I wish I had a guide for how to structure my study session, this gives you a way to do it, like how you preview materials, go to class, time for review, intense study, and testing yourself is what we call the study cycle. But then when you're developing an intense study session, what are a couple quick things that you can do of setting a goal, studying with focus, taking a break, and then reviewing and testing yourself? And in that 45, 50-minute, hour session, you can practice all these things intertwined. And so, again, practice makes perfect. And so, start experimenting with some of these things and see how effective they are for you and how you work them into those spaced out um, different topics sessions that you're going to organize. And so, the most important thing is to reach out when you're requiring you have questions, you want to have a study partner, things like that. Reach out to us if you want to talk about best practices in a study group that you're forming, or techniques to approach professors, or different workshops that we offer on time management, procrastination, test anxiety, remote learning strategies. We have additional expanded resources in each of these areas that we're happy to talk to students about. And so I know I went through a lot of information very fast, and I am willing to answer any questions or go back and recap any of the things that needed more explanation.